Hi guys, Clay Obley here, and today I would like to introduce a new series that I'll be starting where I'll be doing specific tutorials and breakdowns of shots. So today, let's go over the shot we just watched. Alright, let's take a look at the finished product. Imagine there's noises. I'm dying. Alright, so let's look. First off, we have a stock video of aerial shot flying over canyons that I got for free online. Alright, so using Element 3D, you can do crazy awesome things with compositing vehicles, just text, and just 3D elements, and it's pretty awesome. Working with it so far, I've been very impressed by how much you can actually do with it. Alright, so let's talk about the shot. First off, we had to track the shot. I used PFO. Alright, so we have PFO here, and it's very cool, very user-friendly. Pretty much all you do is upload your shot. See the frame rate. This one. Alright, make sure that the frame rate matches the source file. Load it up. And it'll ask you a couple questions. Is the camera free motion? Or is it nodal pan? Nodal pan means it's on a tripod and it's just panning. It's not moving in 3D space. So you'll choose in this shot it is free motion. It is a constant focal length, and you'll finish. And I'm not going to go through the whole tracking process, but what you do is it'll track the whole shot with a whole bunch of different tracking points. I can kind of show you starting off here. Yeah, you can see that it's tracking multiple spots, and then at the end of its tracking, you can go back and delete ones that are you can see it right here, it's red. Those are points that you don't want to keep. They're not stable, and they will mess up the camera solve. Alright, so once you've tracked your footage and brought in the After Effects, then you can begin to bring in 3D objects. Here is one of the helicopters, the first helicopter you see, animated in 3D space. Brought in a second heli that comes in from the right side and flies out of frame. Alright, so let's bring in a third one just so I can demonstrate bringing in 3D objects in a camera solved composition. Alright, so let's make a new layer, a solid, and let's bring in element. Alright, so let's go into the scene setup. Let's bring in a jet. Okay. So let's go to the world transform and do a rotation. And let's position it so that it's in frame. So you can see that bringing a 3D object in a camera solve, it will position it depending on how you set your scene in your camera. It could be anywhere. If you were meticulous and you can set up the anchor point, it could, originate right in frame. But let's take a look at solo the footage and the jet, and we'll take a look. Oh, it's looking pretty decent. And that is not moving. That's supposed to be a stationary jet. That it's not really possible unless you're a Harrier. Okay. Alright, so let's animate the jet real quick just to demonstrate. Alright, so let's position the jet where we want it to be at the end. So let's let's just say that it flies off over the canyon. Okay, that's going to be our end position. So let's hit U to reveal all keyframes. Drag these keyframes to the end. Alright, and let's get our starting keyframes. If you hold Shift and drag, it will greatly save you time in moving your objects around. Alright, so our jet will fly right past the camera. And let's put our motion blur on. And let's see. Alright, we got our jet moving. It's kind of veering to the right, so we're going to have to adjust the rotation. So let's have it start off straight, and then it kind of banks to the right. Let's alright, our Y rotation, yep. Okay, so it starts off, let's have it starting off just barely tilting. And hit U again to reveal keyframe. It starts off here, and let's have it tilt more. Okay. Let's make sure our light in our scene is hitting that object. Which it doesn't appear that it is. Okay, so we're going to have to reposition our light that I have set up here. There we go. Alright, so after a few minutes of tweaking your light and your scene setup, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty cool. Let's adjust our motion blur real quick on our 3D object. Go into the render settings under motion blur. You can adjust the samples so that if you're beginning to see multiple edges, because there's only 6 or so samples, you'll want to up the samples so that it's a lot smoother. It can make the motion blur look a lot better. Alright, so we have the jet going. Okay, so now that we have the animation done for the jet, let's start to kind of do our color correction and scene integration. So we want to make it look like it's a part of the scene. So let's take a look at, let's do a camera blur, lens blur. Let's kind of animate it so that, let's see, take it down to 0. Well, we might want to do 0.3. So I can keyframe kind of when I know that the jet is going to be somewhat out of focus. So let's take a look at the lens blur. We'll move it up to 1.5. You can kind of see it back then. It might be too much. Let's go to 1. That's looking better. Okay, and let's apply a curves adjustment to adjust the black level. A good tip on color correcting is look at the blacks in your source footage, and you could even take a let's take a color sample. Let's take a color sample of the blacks, the blackest blacks in frame here, and you can see that it's not truly black. And that's a good indication of where to adjust your blacks on your element that you bring in. So let's bring up the curves just a tad bit so you can see it's adjusting there. Just right off true black. There we go. Okay, so let's Looks pretty good. Of course, you're going to want to add in the engines being on. Might be kind of important. I don't know, maybe people don't care anymore. Alright, so let's also put in that glow to give it kind of a bloom look, like the sun is just hitting the jet just right. Alright, so let's see here. Let's adjust color B. Let's go on a let's think the sun be somewhat at twilight, or about to be twilight. Let's look at A and B colors only on our glow colors, and see if I bring down the radius, you can see what is actually glowing. There we go. These are the areas that I want some glow off of. So bring up the glow a little bit. Maybe drop the intensity. There we go. There you can kind of, when it's up close, you can see. Let's turn it off. Bring up the radius. It just adds a small highlight on some of the edges. Kind of gives it a nice feeling there. Okay, so let's also consider with the original source footage. I'll go full resolution. The footage that I got was in decent quality. As you can see in the source footage, there is some digital distortion, and that's because of the quality of the video was low that I got. So if you're working with something like that and you want to match, of course you're going to want to match what you make to whatever quality the video is. That way it integrates well. Okay, so we have our jet moving. Let's close off some of these. I added a little bit of noise because of the source footage was not the best quality. You may have to in order to integrate your footage or your elements, you may have to down the quality depending on what you have to work with. Obviously you would not want to work with this type of footage, but in this example it helps to see kind of what you have to do to match your elements to the footage. Okay, so let's do something else. As the jet is getting further away, let's add the sense of atmosphere, and let's bring up our curves. Hit U and you can see the keyframes. As the jet gets further, let's bring down the brightness. And up black's level. Just darken it a little bit. And this simulates the atmosphere in between the camera and the jet. If you notice, things that are further away appear lighter and less detailed. The closer they are, let's adjust that down. Blackers are truly black here as they're closer, as they're closest. That's a little bit too much. Okay. Alright, so let's render out this footage and just take a look what it looks like. our footage after rendered out just a little bit of it, I can already tell that the jet's moving pretty slow compared to the scene and what should really be happening. So let's adjust our Z position. And it's looking a lot better now. You can usually tell by how much motion blur is on the element. That's a good indication of how fast it's going, and you can dial it into what looks best. That's looking a lot better. Cool. All right, so now you got a good idea of bringing in an element and kind of integrating it into your scene after you've done the camera solve and tracked the scene. So now let's take a look. Let's take a look back at our helicopter scene. Okay, in our helicopter scene, I'll quickly go over the different layers that I have here. Okay, first, we have our source footage. Our camera, it doesn't really matter where the camera is positioned. It can be the bottom or top. Alright, so first what I have above the footage is the tracers. And the tracers, all they are is just used the plugin Particular and made them travel in a direction with a percentage of spread, so it looks like someone's just spraying up at them. And they travel fast enough that I've added a motion blur to them, and they look great with the motion blur. Without the motion blur, let's take a look at what they look like. Alright, so they're these little BBs. You can kind of hardly see them. Without the motion blur, they're just little dots. Turn on motion blur there and on, and they look so much better. I added a glow, just a very, very subtle glow. Camera lens blur, just to make sure that they kind of blended well, and then a little bit of noise just to match footage. A lot of that you probably would not be able to tell, but it is good to try and match the footage as much as you can. So next up, let's have the explosion. We have a tracer hit. A bullet hits right at the bottom, and let's pretend that this round is, explode on impact. We'll pretend that. Whatever's firing at him. Alright, so I have 3 charge elements from the Action Essentials 2 package from videocopilot.net. I've put them in 3D space, and the great thing about once you solve your scene and put stuff in 3D space, everything just sticks as if it should. So I positioned the charge elements to the position of the helicopter, and then just kind of adjusted the Y and X and Z to make sure that it was right underneath the helicopter. One of these layers is meant for just fast blur and to kind of make a nice glow where it explodes. You'll also notice, let's kind of get rid of the charges. You'll notice I added a light below this helicopter, and it's actually, this light here is positioned right underneath the helicopter, and I've dialed it in. It is a spotlight, and the cone angle is 15% or 15 degrees, just so that I'll get the helicopter alone. And that just adds a nice little undercut light of the helicopter, kind of simulating the explosion. So it looks great. Alright, so let's bring back our charges. Alright, so now let's get into the particle system that I used for smoke for this helicopter as it's going down. So let's kind of take a look here. Let's solo that, the helicopter, and our footage. Alright, so this is the first smoke particle system that I made using Particular. using the texture map for a, you can see it there, no, it's a cloud PNG or cloudlet. So it's alphaed around the edge, and then I just use that as the particles that kind of emit. And this first one that I made emits beneath the helicopter. I also made a second one, this black smoke here, that is on top of the helicopter, that kind of gives it that dimension that you can see edges of the helicopter here, and then the black smoke kind of trails on top of it. Kind of gives it that smoke is engulfing the helicopter. Alright, so let's unsolo these. Alright, next I have my helicopter, the first helicopter there. Engine exhaust displacement. Alright, this is pretty cool. Alright, so we have our helicopter flying. And I used an adjustment layer and then masked around where the engines would typically exhaust. I added a turbulent displacement. This acts as the heat that's coming out of these exhaust engines, and kind of gives it that nice little movement behind. You know, when you see heat coming off of the road, kind of displaces everything around it. Added that, and then a curves adjustment, and brightened it up just a little bit so that it kind of looked like smoke coming out of the exhaust. Alright, so next, tracers 2. Alright, so I just duplicated the first tracers that I created, and then put them on top of, so they're on top of the helicopter layer, so that the tracers move from being in front of the helicopter to hitting it and then being behind the helicopter. And it kind of adds that 3D space there. The big thing about making these scenes is the little details, like the tracers kind of spraying around, and then they kind of zero in on the helicopter, hit it, and then kind of lose it again. And then they come back in at the end and kind of point, you know, towards that helicopter, and then right at the camera, and boom. Here's another example of the displacement I did on the second helicopter. You can see it's kind of distorting everything around where the exhaust is coming out. It looks pretty cool. Alright, so that's it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to comment below. Like me on Facebook at Mr. Clay Media. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will see you on the next episode.